Welcome back, everybody, to Between Two Sermons. It's so great to be back with you again. As we all know, most of life is spent between two Sundays. That's where the majority of our life is spent. And so we want to help apply what we're learning on Sunday morning throughout the rest of the week. My name is John Amayo. Once again, I have sitting next to me
Rob
Catalani. So great to have you here with us, Rob. This video in particular, we're just going to take a overarching view of where we're going for the year. Just so that people can follow along with us and get a sense of what's on our hearts, what we feel like God is asking us to move forward with the church. And with that in mind, I'd love for you to paint a little bit of a picture for people of where God's really impressed on you. But actually, before I even do that, I just was recalling before we sat down here to talk, a couple of months ago, I walked into your office and you said, well, I was thinking about talking about this one thing for this next year.
Yeah.
But then you said, I actually feel like God has placed something else on my heart.
Yeah.
And the thing that God had placed on your heart also is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. And so I thought that is pretty cool that God orchestrated that together in the same way. So what is it that God placed on your heart?
Well, it was I think the word I used when you came in was renewal. And it's a word that you don't use a lot. I don't know, you think of it more of like, I don't know, something about a new season or something. But I think it's a word that's actually used a lot when we talk about the spiritual life, the Christian life, even in literature. In renewal, think of the word revival. Maybe people are familiar with that word. But often the word revival, sometimes I even think of it's about reaching people who don't know Christ. It's we're having a tent revival or an evangelistic outreach, and it's okay to use it that way. But the historical meaning in the history of the church, even in, let's say, the American experiment through the First Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, these kinds of historical movements, revival really meant the renewal of the people of God, where the church of Jesus Christ has saved and born again people that follow Jesus and go to church, but their faith needs renewal. Their faith needs to be reignited. Their faith needs to be restimulated, almost like you see in the book of Acts. We'll get to that in a second, I guess. Is many times the apostles, after the initial launch of the church, they were filled with the Spirit again, And the idea is, which is why I ended up in the book of Acts, is it's a renewal of our faith. And so my sense is, as I've thought about my own life, but of course talking to church people here, and just reading and thinking about the world that we're living in, that I felt I needed for our church to experience a true renewal, a reigniting of our faith, a deeper commitment to our faith, for the purpose ultimately of accomplishing our mission. Yeah. Sometimes what churches do, pastors like you and me do, is we want to go right to the end zone. It's like we're coaching a football team, saying, how do we get to the Super Bowl? Instead of saying, how do we become the kind of players that actually are healthy enough and have a solid vision and planning to actually win something. So renewal is about the congregation, starting with us and including us, deepening our experience in the faith, and so that we can ultimately. So that's kind of where my head was at, and that's what I was getting at. Tell me about you. I don't remember what you were.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's a sense of. As I talk with people, as I even look at my own life, people are just really busy and very, I think you may alluded to it in your sermon, exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sense in which I don't believe that's the state in which Jesus is asking us to live.
That's right.
As Christians. I don't think that's what he's saying. Like, I want you at the edge of burnout in order to follow me.
Right.
The Christian life is about experiencing the power of the Holy Spirit, living through you, and just going along for the ride in a lot of cases, and saying yes to him over and over and over again, whatever he wants to do us, but it's through his power, not our power, that we need to do it.
So my hope is, I do remember that meeting, so I think it is significant. That's why we're here. I think God has working in our lives independently first, and really talking about wanting to see our church have experienced a renewal. And that brought me quickly, when I was thinking I was going in a different direction, different, let's say, biblical book subject and choice, I thought of the book of Acts, which, is of course, the genesis of the church. But it's not just the genesis of the church, the beginning of the church, which is important. But it's really looking at what is this new life made up of? What do you want to call it? The dynamics, the principles, the life affirming realities that make up the church as it was designed. Because I think, of course, the New Testament is our guide and our true north, but it's not just telling us what happened. It's about how we're supposed to live. I mean, that's what we call a living word. So I think if we need to have a renewal, then we need to go back to a degree and look at, I think the book of Acts is a great place to go and say, how was the church not only born, but how did it experience God's power, back to this question of power, in ways that transformed it? They never stopped being sinners, in a sense, and being people who walked through the world that you and I walk through, but they really did accomplish, as Jesus said, even in John's Gospel, you will do even greater things than me. In a sense, the church, even the one we see in the book of Acts, really was used by God to experience great personal transformation, but also great ministry. So that seemed to be a place where I thought we could spend, as it turns out, the better part of a year.
Yeah.
If we start here in September, and with a few appropriate breaks, we'll go all the way till Easter.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And so as you think through maybe even what God's placed on your heart, what do you think? Like, I love that phrase, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Like, what would it look like for Browncroft to be a church where people were truly experiencing renewal at a deep level? What do you think that would look like?
I think what the product would be, or the end vision would be, goes back to the word you said a minute ago. People that are experiencing true joy, and that joy is being expressed by them winsomely and with enthusiasm, or with a sense of desire, sharing their faith. I mean, that to me, that's the end goal. It's really being a church that doesn't have a program for evangelism per se, but that we've become more fired up by our own faith, more motivated, more captivated by our own walk with Christ, such that we can become an even brighter light and witness, back to the book of Acts, to the people around us. I mean, that to me is the goal. The goal of this is really to see a church that people have experienced that kind of renewal. It's almost like this may be when I first think of the word renewal, I think actually of one of the first things that comes to my mind is like renewing your wedding vows. Just this word that comes to mind.
Yep.
But let's just use that as an example. When people renew their wedding vows, I assume, have you ever done it?
No, never.
You're too
Got
young.
25 years coming up, so maybe.
But I mean, I think the idea there is, if it's done sincerely, is people are going back to say, of course life takes its twists and turns, but why? I want to go back to the commitment of the love I made, let's say in a covenant relationship here with husband and wife, and I want to recapture. I mean, this is the idea. It's not just sentimental. I think it's genuine. I want to recapture that love, and I want to reignite that love, and I want to deepen that love. Yeah. So that really is my thinking. Is that what is it going to take for us to recapture, reignite our faith, such that we can become all the more effective in the mission God has given us. So I think it would be people like you and me in our congregation, seeing that joy come out of their innermost being, and sharing the faith more, and seeing more people in our lives because of that renewal come to know Christ.
I love that word. You used it twice, joy.
Yeah.
I think most of us don't associate that with renewal. Maybe we wouldn't automatically associate that word, but a joy, for our church to be a place filled with joyful people who are just excited about what God's doing in their life. Yeah. And then, of course, it's going to overflow from you if you're really experiencing that kind of joy. Yeah. I love that vision for us.
Amen. I mean, I obviously I don't live in a perfect state of joy in my walk with Jesus, but I know what it means. I know what it's like, and I really do believe that even in this broken world, the greatest pleasure, joy, whatever the right words are that we can have, actually is had in union with Christ, is actually had in our walk with God, whether it's with Christ, you and Christ, but in community, whatever it is. So I really believe that. I know sometimes we don't know if people really. It sounds good, but is it true? But I really do. Yeah. So that's my hope. I think someone whoever the most, mature and God, honoring follower of Jesus, I think that person would be joyful. This is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. It's not a drag. Right. It's not meant to be a burden. It's not meant to be exhausting. Right. It may be hard work, depending on what God's called you to do, but it's life-giving. You know this, and people know this. When you're doing something you really love, could be spending time with someone you love, it could be a vocation, it could be a hobby, it actually gives you energy. Yeah. It brings life to you, even if you're pouring some. That's, I think, a way to talk about joy, and I think that's what I'd love to see us experience more of here. Wow. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. Well, we both brought a couple, resources for people, because we want you to be able to grow, not just through what happens on a Sunday morning, but if you want to explore this on your own. Both of us have a couple of resources here to share. They may interest you, they may not. If they don't, ignore what we say, and that's fine. But what would you share?
Well, a couple quick ones. One, I would say first and foremost, maybe I mentioned this, the Book of Acts. We're going to do it starting in September, but we'll go as all the way till Easter. So read the Book of Acts. I don't have that in front of me, but I would say take some time. And some of you, strongly encourage you, those of you who choose to do Sermon Align with us, do that. So allow this great book to speak into your life, number one. A couple other very quick things. This is a book, it's a big read, but I want to share it because it was the inspiration, at least for my title. It's called The Dynamics of Spiritual Life. It was written, it's an older book, it was written, I think, around 1980. Richard Lovelace, a professor from Gordon Conwell. But it's a book that I really came back and reread after many years, and it was reissued, and it's not actually on the Book of Acts, so that's where I'm taking the title from, although there's probably some Book of Acts references, but it's really on this question of looking at first the history of the church, that is let's say the First Awakening, the Second Great, if you're familiar with these ideas. How did the church, let's say in America, it might go beyond America, experience the renewal that you and I just got done talking about? What did it look like in real time? Then it does look some at the scriptures too. In how does the Bible talk about renewal? So that's a great book. It was very inspirational to me. It's a big book, so you may not. It depends on your interest. Another couple books that you might find interesting. One is a book that's also been around for a while, but it made me think of this series, Desiring God, John Piper. Some of you know John Piper, who's still doing great ministry in the Midwest, but well-known name, connected with Desiring God, the Gospel Coalition, other organizations. But he's most famously well-known. He's written many, many books, but this is probably the most important one, or the most well-known one. And the phrase that I think comes out of it is, God is most satisfied in us. God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. It's a great, summary of joy, of what a renewed faith looks like. That these aren't two things that don't go together. That our deep desiring of God, our deeper commitment in union with Christ, actually also brings about some of our greatest joy and satisfaction. Yeah. God is most glorified in our lives, not when we're exhausted, but when we are most satisfied in Him. What a beautiful statement. So that's a book, if you haven't read it, it really dives into that, and it goes into many areas of life. And then this one, I don't know if, John, if you've ever read it.
Haven't read that.
It's one of the best books on prayer. It's also, Paul Miller is still alive and well in ministry, but this book, I'm going to say, is maybe 10 to 15 years old. It's called A Praying Life. And there are many great books on prayer. Prayer is one of the dynamics of spiritual life. We'll be talking about it some in this series. But this is, I would say, a very accessible, very usable, but deeply engaging book about prayer. Well known, probably sold 500,000 copies. So those are my quick reads. What do you got?
Love it. I got a couple here as well. First of all would be Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby.
Great
I don't know.
book.
Yeah.
Yep.
For me, revolutionary. This book, again, it's not super new. It's been around for maybe 30 years, maybe 40 even at this point. But the idea of we don't make our own plans and then ask God to bless them. Right. The idea from here is just see where God's working and join Him where He's working. And that's the key to vibrant Christian life.
That's right.
And then this one is a newer one by a pastor in Australia called Mark Sayers. This is called Reappearing Church. The title of it is The Hope for Renewal in the Rise of a Post-Christian Culture. So he's talking really real time in our society and what it looks like for us to experience renewal. So if you kind of want a real time kind of look at stuff,
very smart guy and wise thinker.
Definitely. And he also hosts a podcast called Rebuilders, which
both of I've listened to. It's great.
Yeah. So thanks so much for hanging in there with us. We can't wait to see what God does in the year ahead. Thank you, Rob, for joining us on this.
Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to being along this journey with you as well. So take care, and we'll see you back here next time.